Christmas gift for you. Let's all give Ellie a nice round of applause. Thank you. Christmas. Okay, now we'll start the meeting, and if you would join me in the pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Let's do something different. This is spontaneous, and I'm not really prepared to do anything. But Don, do you want to lead us in a song this morning? Would you be willing to lead us in a song this morning? We don't sing every single week, and it was brought up the other week that our speaker was surprised that we didn't sing, and she was disappointed. And maybe we should do it on occasion. Maybe this morning's a kind of a special occasion since it's our last meeting of the calendar year. So I'm going to put Don on the spot and ask him if he'll lead us in song. What do you want to say? Oh, let's something that everybody can sing.
Oh, you'd have to tell me, I guess. I'm a little.
What's everybody want to sing this
What do
morning?
you want to sing?
Jingle Bell.
All right.
What's in the ear? Good.
Rolling down the swing in a one-horse open sleigh. Over the hills of love, laughing all the way. Bells on cocktails ring, making spirits bright. What fun it will to watch sing to the mountain something play. Oh, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh.
Thank you. We should have had Bill Girosh leading this song. He's the one who called that out. Unfortunately, our greeters are getting their breakfast right now. Sorry, Bill, I'm throwing things off here this time.
That's okay. This is
The Christmas spirit, you
that's
know?
right.
Needle them whenever you can. Okay, guest today, one guest, but special guest, Gene Moran, our speaker. Thanks for coming, Gene. Good morning, Gene. Not yet, not yet. We will.
I was supposed to say, Stan, we'll welcome you.
You're welcome, Ellie.
Well, Gene, we look forward to your presentation a little bit later. We'll have you up here shortly. And you'll lead us in our second song. That's great. Andy, you're going to do our 50-50?
Two two 7 1 6 7.
Not even.
167. Aaron Comrie, congratulations. Do we have, were you close, Dan? You weren't even close. Yeah. A number of us don't even pull our tickets out. We never even look out. Do we have any happy dollars this morning? Chris Izzo.
Good morning. I have $5 happy dollars for Todd and Dawn King for hosting us on Sunday at their house. It was a great place to celebrate Rotary and each other, and great food and an amazing freaking house. So, but anyways, wonderful place. Todd gave us a tour, and it's just a really neat location, and was I think it was a good time. So thank you, Todd.
I just want to mirror Chris's sentiment. I have $5 happy dollars for Dawn and Todd for hosting a wonderful event, second year in a row. And everybody just had a really good time, a lot of smiling faces, a lot of great food, and great libations. Thank you very much.
Chris, you coming up?
So I have a happy dollar because last night I told you I told you last week that my daughter had had surgery on her neck. So last night she needed her stitches out. So guess what? I took the stitches out. And as I was doing it, I was screaming and then said, "You better pick out a good nursing home for me."
Joanne?
For a man, but we were ringing the bell. We were ringing the bells on Saturday in front of Boskov. And it was Jim Norton and I, and we were the first shift at 10 o'clock, and it was cold. And so anyhow, it was probably, we were only a half hour into the shift. This man comes up, and it's amazing how generous people are if you've ever done this. But he comes up and he puts his money in and he says, "You know what? I should be buying you coffee instead of putting money in here." And so Jim Norton said to him, "Well, we're going to be here a while. So, if you want to come back." So anyhow, I guess it was probably about an hour later, this man pulls up. He says, "Come here," to me. And so I went over. I was a little afraid. But anyhow, I went over and he gave us 2 cups of hot chocolate. How nice. Yes. So I will say I did pay it forward because Christina and Todd had the last shift and it was cold. So I ran down to Rutter's and I got them hot chocolate. And I think they were happy for it. So
Awesome. Thanks, Joey. Anyone else? Mr. Kraft?
Just a quick happy dollar, an update on Maury Hooper. I got a message from him yesterday. He finally got the last of the staples out of his leg. Stitches 2 weeks ago, staples yesterday. So he expects after the first year to be able to return, and he's doing well and appreciates everybody who expressed an interest in him.
Femoral artery, yeah.
So I'm going to give 21 happy dollars today. Some of you know what's going on with my dad. He's had medical issues since August. This will be my last meeting for a while. I am able to give him a final gift, and we will be bringing him home December 21st. So I'll be back at some point.
We're glad to hear, Karen, that he's recouping and not recouping, but
he's in hospice.
okay. Well, it's good to get the updates. I think we were asking earlier, and it's good to hear the updates. Anyone else?
You want to check online?
Okay.
Wait.
Oh, does somebody have some?
Yeah, Friedel does.
Can you unmute her?
Hang on. I'm gonna go to you. You guys better unmute.
That's what we're gonna hear.
I don't know, we're gonna hear her, but it's always a surprise. Ask her to unmute.
All right. Friedel, are you talking yet?
Friedel, try to.
Yes, sorry, it's difficult to come in. Well, hearing that Big L is coming home, that's wonderful, Karen. You'll have a lovely Christmas. So 5 happy dollars for that. And of course, 5 happy dollars from both of us, Bob and myself, to Todd and Dawn for this wonderful event. It was a lovely crowd, but we were so sorry for everybody who didn't make it because it's a once in a lifetime. And when the kings open their castle, it's something really to remember. So if we're ever invited again, please do come. 10 happy dollars for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Friedel. It's good to see you online there.
We gotta figure it out.
Anyone else? Any other happy dollars? If not, do we have any announcements to be made? Chris?
Just a quick announcement that now's a great time. It's the end of the year to make your donation to the Rotary Foundation. I am here, obviously, today. If you have your checkbook and want to get that to me, I'll take care of it for you. You can also make it online. So thanks.
Thanks for that reminder, Chris. Anyone else? Any other announcements, Chris? Chris and Chris?
Just a reminder, the grant application was sent back out last night, so please share that with local organizations here in York County so we can share and help maybe sponsor a few good causes in 2025. So if you have any questions, let me know, but thank you. And their due date is January 31st. Any questions, let me know.
Very good. Thanks, Chris. Anyone else? Any other announcements? If not, before I ask Kyle King to come forward and introduce our speaker, I'd like to just say, and for those of you that may not be aware, today's Kyle King's last meeting with us. Something about moving on to a better job and this, that, and the next day. But Kyle's been a great member of our club, past president. He served as our club administration chair. Currently, he does, and obviously is going to be vacating that spot. Has helped out with Students of the Month, and just been a really great member. So, Kyle, we appreciate everything that you've done for the club. We're going to miss you. We will certainly welcome you back at any point in time. But let's just give Kyle a big round of applause. Now I'll turn it over to you and let you introduce our speaker.
Good morning, Yorkies. Good morning. This morning it's my pleasure to introduce formally our speaker, Jeannie Moran. Jeannie is a retired pediatric physical therapist who reads and writes stories in which unlikely heroes make a difference in their corner of the world. In her everyday life, she strives to be one of them. And with that, did you bring any books with you today? Okay, so I know I don't want to steal her thunder, so she'll probably tell you a little bit about that in case anyone wanted. But with that short introduction, I give you our speaker, Jeannie Moran.
Is that good? Okay. And there's the remote.
Yep, is it turned on?
That's a good question. It is now.
Okay.
So I'm going to be speaking with you about a seldom mentioned piece of World War II era history called the KInderTransport. Is anyone here familiar with this? Just a few people. See, to me, that's fascinating because we're all educated adults. And how do we not know about this entire program? Okay, so that didn't do it. It did.
We're doing it manually. Yeah, okay.
Okay. So a little bit about me. All four of my grandparents emigrated from Germany between the two world wars during the 1920s. So that my grandfather served under the Kaiser and my father served in World War II as an American. So there was always that little bit of dichotomy. And my grandmothers lived very close to us. One lived in the apartment above ours, the other lived a mile away. So there was a lot of German in my ancestry. Excuse me. And as I started to learn about World War II in school, I began to wonder, like, if my grandparents hadn't emigrated and my parents had both been born there in Germany, what would their upbringing have been like? They would have been growing up during the Nazi years. They would have been teenagers during the Nazi years. So what would their experiences have been? And like most of us, when I learned about World War II era in school, we went straight to the war, right? We went straight to concentration camps and we went straight to all of those things. But I wondered, since the Nazis took power in 1933, and war didn't start until 1939. What happened in those years that those intelligent, educated people, Germans, fell for this whole Nazi regime? This was always a big unknown to me. So I did a lot of research as an adult through my local library system. You'd be amazed at what you can get through interlibrary loan. I went to the Library of Congress to do research and actually pulled out German newspapers from the era. My father helped me translate them. And then eventually, in order to research one of the books I wrote, I went to Munich and did research on site. And plus, it's a great reason to drink at the Hofbrauhaus, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. As I was doing all of this research, I learned about a number of events that I had never heard of before, including the KInderTransport. And I was so fascinated with that pre-war era that I ended up writing 2 books set in that time and place. So the KInderTransport, Kinder being German for children, it was a series of coordinated rescue efforts by rail, sea, and sometimes by air for children who were at risk but living in Germany and occupied lands. It started just before World War II broke out. So it started December 1st of 38 and ended literally the day war was declared, September 1st of 39. Excuse me, I have a frog in my throat. So all of this came about because of Kristallnacht, which is the night of broken glass. Early in 1938, in November, there was the first really big physical display of aggression against people who are Jewish or have Jewish heritage. They called it the Night of Broken Glass. There was over 100 synagogues across Germany and Austria burned. Thousands of Jewish-owned businesses were looted, vandalized. The owners of those businesses were dragged into the street, beaten, taken to concentration camps. Almost 100 men were killed in the process of all of this. And this was done by the SA, the stormtroopers, and the Hitler Youth. And this was all throughout those 2 countries. So all through Europe and all through the world, there was all of a sudden this big understanding. This was no longer just laws against people who were Jewish. This was now physical aggression. So the following days, this is a photo from the immigration office in Munich, days after Kristallnacht, where the people are lining up to get me out of here. But of course, as we all know, immigration is a long paperwork process. You need sponsors in another country. They have to vouch for your housing. They have to vouch for your job. You can't just go when you want to go. So very few of these families were able to get out before it was too late, because September 1st of 39, which was only 10 months later, the borders were closed, the first day of the war. 10 months, not very long in a paperwork shuffle. So all throughout the British Isles, there was increased concern among those people who were really social minded. The churches, the social service agencies, saying, what can we do to help any of this? Maybe we can help the kids. So the German and British social welfare agencies cooperated and pulled together this whole KInderTransport from November the 10th until December the 1st, when the first transport left. Imagine international cooperation inside of 4 weeks. I mean, that's amazing. They did this. They raised funds. They organized the international transportation. They got permissions. They found foster families for all of these children. They needed guaranteed payment, something to the order of about $5,000 in today's money, in order to guarantee safe transportation, to pay the foster family for the food and care for these children. It was all done under the understanding that eventually these kids would go home. When the crisis was over, the kids would go home because, of course, they didn't know what was down the road. Believe it or not, the Nazi regime cooperated with this because they just wanted to get rid of all of these unwanted people. Now, I have no evidence that Rotarians were involved, but these were the types of signs that went up all over the UK. Save the children. To be silent means to acquiesce, which I think is amazing. I mean, that's the kind of thing that we still talk about, right? You have to do something. But I really do think that if somebody who had the heart of a Rotarian or any other social welfare group, that they saw a sign like this, they would say, you know what? I wonder if we can do something to help. So the British government agreed to allow these unaccompanied, only the kids, unaccompanied kids to travel and live in the UK with just these temporary visas. This poor girl in this photo, does she break your heart? Is she the saddest looking kid ever? It was understood, like I said, that the kids would go back to their families, in part because most of the families were already in process of trying to get their paperwork lined up for immigration themselves. But in truth, as we all know, because we understand the history, most of the kids never saw their families again. So the kids who were eligible to go were mostly kids who were Jewish, but also orphans, Romani, that my generation always called gypsies, children of communists, other political adversaries, and only kids under age 17. They didn't want anyone who was military eligible at that moment in time. They wanted to make sure it was kids, not young adults. Believe it or not, in those few weeks, they got 10,000 kids out of those occupied lands. Why don't we know about this? I mean, this is marvelous, right? So of course you don't put kids on trains and planes unaccompanied, especially for international travel. So they did ask adults to accompany the kids. It couldn't be the parents. It had to be unrelated adults. Most of the adults who agreed to accompany these children were Jewish, and every one of them had to agree to take that same transportation directly back to Germany. All of them did. If they hadn't, the threat under the Nazi regime was the transports will stop. Every one of them came back. Talk about unsung heroes. Isn't that amazing? That's one of the gentlemen. That's actually a photo from the Holocaust Museum website. Excuse me. So the parents decided if their child was going to go. That was their decision to make. But imagine how desperate they would have to be to put their child on a train without them, surrounded by strangers, to go to a place hundreds of miles away, to live with people they didn't know. The kid didn't know them, the parents didn't know them. They had to take these organizations' word for the fact that this was going to be a safe place for their child. They were going to send them to a country where the kid didn't know the language, the kid didn't know the customs. Many of the kids were not going to other Jewish families. They were going to families of other faiths. And they were only allowed the clothes on their back and one suitcase. That's it. That's all they were allowed. How desperate must these parents have been? Can you imagine doing this to your kid? I can't imagine. And these photos are amazing, aren't they? A lot of the trains left at midnight because they didn't want the locals to see these heartbreaking scenes. There are a lot of stories that came out afterward of the parents changing their minds, pulling the kid back off the train. I can't do this. I can't do this. And canceling last minute. And who could blame them, right? Of course, they don't know what's down the road, but they are truly desperate that they would do that. How about that quilt? Isn't that amazing? So the kids were transported from Germany. The trains crossed into Holland or Belgium. And once they were at the coast, the kids went by boat. Most of them ended up in England, but some went to Ireland, Scotland, and Sweden. And the kids wore these number badges around their necks to connect them with their luggage later on, and to, like for the foster family who doesn't speak German, they would know that they were getting kid number 388, and they would be there with that information so that when this little guy came off the train, they would know that that was the little guy they were going to be watching over. So the kids, the kinder, remember certain things in looking back on that transportation in those years. A lot of them remember being told that they were going to England where they might see the king and queen. Talk about parents trying to reframe this in a positive light. They do remember stopping at railroad crossings and babies being shoved in through open windows in baskets. Talk about desperation. That visual just stuck in my head when I was reading those accounts. I ended up putting it in one of my books because it just blows my mind. They remember getting to the German border and having the Nazi guards come on board and rifle through their luggage looking for valuables. And then a few minutes later, when they crossed into Holland, the Dutch guards came on and greeted them all friendly. The Dutch ladies brought them cookies, brought them hot cocoa, and there was just such a different mood instantly once they left Germany. These kids could be any one of our kids, couldn't they? It's amazing. Of course, once they were in England, life isn't easy at all. Some of the older girls were expected to quit and care for kids. Some of the older boys were expected to quit school and do farm work. And I mean, you've got to expect some readjustment problems. This is huge, being ripped away from your family and deposited in a foreign country. And during the war, of course, life was not easy. If you were one of the KinderTransport kids and you were with a foster family in London, guess where you went a year later? You were in the middle of the Blitz. You had to leave again and go off into the countryside. Same thing in Coventry if you were with a family there. About 1,000 of the older kids, ended up serving with the British Armed Forces during the war years. And about 400 others were labeled as enemy aliens, which I think is very interesting. And I found no other information about that. They were held in internment camps or deported. I don't know how they snuck in, what the deal was, but that's always a very little interesting aside. After the war, most of them worked through their trauma and their grief and became active, productive adults. They married, they had families of their own, they had grandchildren of their own. Many of them became British citizens. Some emigrated, but very few went back to Central Europe, mostly because there was nothing there anymore. I mean, Central Europe after World War II was a mess, right? I mean, who wants to move there? Especially their families would have been gone. And again, these are photos all from the various websites I quote at the end. All throughout the UK, there are statues and plaques commemorating the children of the KinderTransport. This statue is at the Liverpool Street Station in London, which was the central location where most of the trains ended up arriving. If you want to know a little bit more about the KinderTransport, there's an interesting documentary called Into the Arms of Strangers. I know you can get that one, you can buy it or whatever, but you can rent it on Prime. And What Life, which came out last year with Anthony Hopkins in it, is a fascinating story. I don't know if anybody saw that movie. It's a fascinating story of, it's a retelling of one man's effort to get children out of occupied Czechoslovakia. Sir Nicholas Winton was a British citizen who had special ties to Czechoslovakia. And he alone and his organization, his network, rescued over 600 kids from occupied Czechoslovakia. It's a very good movie. I highly recommend it if you can get hold of that one. And Anthony Hopkins, what's not to like, right? So here's a list of some of the photos and content that were my sources. I do have references. If anybody is interested, I can get all of that. Thank you to Bill, there's Bill, for inviting me to begin with. He saw my presentation at a Masonic meeting. And thank you to Kyle for inviting me. Thank you all for listening to me. We got lots of time for questions.
Excuse me, I'm gonna switch out batteries while we do that.
Okay.
Just take a minute. Okay, go ahead with questions.
I was old enough to remember the mid years of World War II. In the mid 40s, I remember what happened, all the things that we had to go through, not able to get tires for your automobiles, and you get on and on and on and on. I can't imagine these children getting to go to England and they teach them in school. Did they teach them in Germany or England? How did they learn to understand?
They had to cope because there was, I'm sure there was not English as a second language the way that there is now in school. And they just had to cope.
They didn't learn English.
Yes. And most of them ended up, like I said, most of them ended up being British citizens when they got older. Yeah. Yes.
Not a question, but years ago, my wife's grandmother, who was German, told me of her experience on Kristallnacht. She lived on a street, I don't remember the name of the town. And they had Jewish friends who owned a furniture store across the street. And she talked about the horror of the Nazis or the SS, I'm not sure who, literally took the men in the family and threw them out the third floor window with ropes around their neck. And she said she could remember seeing them swinging as they struggled to live, but they, of course, were hung. It's pretty horrible.
Yeah, part of the research that I did for my books, I interviewed a woman who lived in Munich during Kristallnacht, and she ended up she and her sister went out on the KinderTransport. So I got similar stories from her. It's amazing to hear those first person accounts. Yeah, I'm sorry, there was a hand over here too. Yes.
In your readings, did you find, so again, there's about a 10-month grace period where the Nazis allowed this to happen. Did you, in your readings, find out what was it, just because then once war actually started, they weren't going to provide any grace to anyone? Or, what was the switch that seemed to flip, that they went from showing some sense of decency and allowing these children to leave to all of a sudden now we're just killing everyone in concentration camps?
Yeah, it seemed to be that the day World War II broke out, they closed the borders. Done. So there is literally in One Life, that movie that I referred to, there is a train set to leave from Czechoslovakia, and it is set to leave September 1st. And it is stopped at the station and they cannot leave. Whether or not that particular event actually happened, I don't know. But yes, I understand that the borders were closed. Done. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Gene, that dollar figure, one day for $5,000. That was not per child.
Per child.
So really, we're talking about the money that could have $50 million.
Millions of dollars, and they did it inside of, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
They started the first transport, they started getting the act together in early November of 38. By December 1st, they had enough for one transport, and then over the course of the next 10 months, they kept going. And they would just, the minute they had the funds raised, they would line up another bunch of kids to do this. It's amazing, isn't it? Yes.
So to give real credit for Dean's program today, John Schmidt and Maury Hooper, I'm pretty sure the two, who came to me a couple months ago to say we had at this meeting, saw this great program. And it's important for people to know this because we're always looking for good programs. So lo and behold, they're right here among our members. The other thing is the One Life. There was a 60-minute broadcast a couple of years ago, and it must have been this fellow because they gathered people who had survived through his efforts. Imagine. It's emotional just to think about it. So they were going to have some little gathering for him. He said, "I'll be there." Well, there they were in the audience.
They were.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a very, if you can find that one, it's, it's Sir Nicholas Winton, and he is just a member of the audience. Like you said, it looked like he was going to get some kind of an award. And what he didn't know was that everyone in the audience was a KInderTransport survivor, thanks to him. Yeah, is that like, yeah, bring your tissues. That's a killer. It's a killer. Yes, I'm sorry, there was another hand back there somewhere. No, okay. One Life, is that the one you're looking for? I think it was for rent on Prime. Yes.
PBS has carried a number. I've seen the One Life, and then there was another that showed the children going to, not immediately going to families, but going to a camp setting.
Okay.
And having adults there that help them with the transition.
Yes.
And get them to their families.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yes, I've read about those as well. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a thought.
Yes.
The adults, all these adults that went and did this, they were German, and they did all this about these children. I'm just wondering, you said the train stopped, and those people that did all of this, they didn't get out, did they?
They did not. No, they did not. Yeah, and the one gentleman that I showed the picture of in the adults who accompanied, that gentleman actually went to a concentration camp, told his story. His Norbert Wollheim, I want to say his name is, his narrative is on the Holocaust Memorial website. If you ever go to their website, they have audio visuals of interviews of dozens and dozens of people. And his is one of them. And he tells the story of being one of their companions and going back and then pretty much getting stuck. He's stuck in Germany and he's arrested and he's sent to a concentration camp. He survived. But yeah. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to say something. And sometimes you're embarrassed.
Oh, yes.
But then by the same token, the Germans did a lot of good for a lot of people. The Nazis were the bad part of it and made it bad for the German people all over the world.
Yep. Yep. Thank you, everyone. Oh, I'm sorry.
To follow up on that, it is a sense of guilt that the country is carrying to this day. It is amazing how, it's a good point, how they, from one side, but imagine how you could feel hearing these stories.
You're a good citizen.
When I did my research in Munich, I stayed at a bed and breakfast, and the owner was born and raised German, and she asked what I was researching, and I told her, and she said, you don't worry about Germans ever making that mistake again. We have entire courses starting in like 4th grade of basically how Germany screwed up the 20th century and how we will never let that happen again.
You're right, prior to 2017, I went with a friend to Germany. And we were told through many of the tours that we went on, that we were not to jokingly,
Oh, absolutely.
that you can be arrested.
Yes,
So they still carry that stigma.
yes. Yes. But thank you, everyone. Thank you. Okay, see, there it is.
Let's give Jean one more round of applause. I think we were chatting a little bit before her presentation, and she said there's a lot of, we always do focus on things that happen during the war and not really ahead of it. And it's interesting to just hear this and great information to have. So I did tell Jean that we will be donating a book in honor of her presentation. And Nate would like to get a photo of us if we can do that. Thank you. Very good. Thank you. Another round of applause for Jean. And thank you, Mr. Schmidt and Bill Girash. And if Maury was involved in making this recommendation, what a great presentation to have. With that, I want to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas, a great start to your new year. We do not meet next week. We won't be meeting on New Year's Eve. And I do believe at some point, I'll throw this out, that we will be in need of people to help serve lunch on New Year's Eve day at Our Daily Bread. That's the 5th Tuesday of the month. So that'll be one of those days that we're going to be in serving lunch. So if you're available and in town and able, sending out an email just to get names of people that can help with that. If you've never done it, and that is a day off for you, I highly recommend doing it. A number of people that have done it in the past, it's a great thing to do. So if you always had to work and you weren't off, I highly recommend trying to help out and serve lunch. So with that, everyone have a great day, great Christmas, great New Year.
My clients 20 years ago invited me to his wedding, and it turned out the brides, I'm not making this up. The bride's grandfather was Hitler's accountant. And all these old Nazis showed up for this wedding.
I can believe it.
Yeah.
They all headed to South America.
Yeah.
Not all, but a good number of them. Yeah. That's crazy.
What an experience.
But now I was curious, the $5,000 they money. That didn't go to Germany. That went for all the costs pretty much. I think when they cost
More transportation would start to guess, yeah.
I don't want to get to that piece of it, but I was just curious about that.